was listening to an episode of Ed Milet's podcast, and he was talking about decisions. He was applying it to a conversation he had with his son. His son was about to go to college for the first time. And so he was telling his kid, you know, you're going to be faced with all kinds of decisions that you didn't have to make before. And he was sort of telling him, you know, if you're presented with these decisions, you need to ask yourself, is that aligned with who I am? Is that aligned with what I stand for? And he was kind of going into detail about that. And as I'm listening, I started thinking about all of the decisions as a graph writer that you get faced with. And I thought it would be a good topic to go over because there's a lot of things you can make decisions about that could either better your life or better your graph culture. And then there's so many decisions that you're faced with that could have like serious like repercussions. So I thought maybe we could go over a few of those and see where that goes. So when you first start writing, I think most of us just start kind of writing on shit and tagging or whatever. But then there comes a time where you start to kind of try to decide, what kind of writer do I want to be? You know, do I want to be a bomber? Do I want to be a piecer? Do I want to do legal, illegal? Do I want to hit freights? You know, what kind of writer do I want to be? So what I wanted to talk about is sort of how some of those decisions can affect you, positive or negative. Let's say on the mild side, you're like, you know, I really like the graph culture. I just want to be involved, but I'm not really trying to go run around on the freeway or have the cops chasing me. I just want to do like legal stuff and just kind of hang out in the yards and stay under the radar and stuff like that. You know, that's not the most dangerous decision you could make, but at the same time, you're going to have a lot of people kind of, you know, maybe not giving you the same amount of respect as somebody that they see, you know, all over the freeway or they see up on the streets or something like that. So that's kind of, when you look at who you are, do you really care about what other people think and what other people say about you? Like, if you're going to let that bother you, you may end up doing things that are outside of your comfort zone or doesn't really fit in with who you are. You know, I've gotten to a place in my life where, for the most part, I just don't give a fuck what people think about me. And it's like such a lighter way to go about things because you just don't really, just try to do things that fit in with what you're trying to do and not so much about how other people's opinions are coming at you. You know, I fail at this from time to time, you know, like when I go to make a informational video and put it on social media or something, I get a little bit of mostly positive responses, but then every now and then somebody will come in and go like, toy, or your can control sucks, or just some negative bullshit. And then I find myself like holding back and like going, I don't really want to deal with that. But then I remind myself like, you know what, you've established that you don't fucking care about that stuff. So, I mean, when I say I don't care, it's like there's a maintenance to it. You know, you have to remind yourself sometimes, you know, that shit doesn't matter. I kind of really started going down that path when I was listening to Gary Vee, and he had this great quote that really sat well with me. It wasn't so much exactly the quote, but sort of what he meant by it. And I think it goes something like, a lot of people work a job that they hate to buy things they don't want to impress people they don't like. I think that's a good, is analogy the right? I think it's good. It's a good, I'm going to go with analogy even if it's wrong, but a good analogy for a lot of the reasons why we make the decisions we make. And we make decisions. And if you look in the graph culture, and I can take myself as an example, when we were talking about, Cub and I were, the gut feeling episode, I was talking about how I was hanging off of a bridge. That was a decision I made based on opinions of other people. I felt like that was a way to get the next level of respect, you know, to do things like that. But when I was out there on the bridge, you know, I realized that wasn't the right decision. That wasn't really the kind of writer that I was, you know, and I was bombing and doing all this other stuff. And I started seeing the consequences of different kinds of bombing. Like, you can do a lot of illegal graph and not have the cops, you know, kicking your door down. A good example is, everybody knows the stories of Gank when he was doing all the fronts of the freeway signs back in the 90s. And that kind of graffiti, it's very expensive. It's very time consuming. It gets you on a list of writers that, you know, whatever the fucking graffiti squad or whatever they're called really wants to get you. You know, you got to think if you're going to be doing illegal graffiti, if you do the kind of illegal graffiti that's like in the cuts that, it's a whole bombed out block and there's all kinds of like shit everywhere. And, it's not the kind of graph that say the cops are trying to get you for. But if you're doing like city property and shit where they have to shut down lanes of traffic and things that actually slow traffic. I remember one day after the guys did the front of one of those freeways and we went to get flicks. And since they had painted the whole front of the freeway, all of the information was covered. So not only is it costing the city a lot of money, and just to be clear, I'm not taking a stance on whether you should do that or not, but just making a point that, not only is it costing a lot of money, but the traffic was backed up for miles because nobody could tell where the fucking off-ramp was going and shit. Like it was a freeway interchange. So nobody knew which way was, I think it was like the 405 and the 101 or something. And so all the traffic is all fucked up, So you have to think, if you're going to be a bomber and you want to hit the streets really hard, that's a decision you got to make. And you got to think like, am I prepared to pay the potential consequences that come with that? I had to ask myself that question when I was really into bombing in the 90s. That's like really all I wanted to do. I mean, I was kind of like a well-rounded, I guess you could say. I was doing pieces in the yards. I was hitting trains. But really, what was the most fun for me is the streets and freeways. Like I liked that the best. But at the same time, I was seeing the cops kicking in doors. I was seeing my people getting actual prison time. Like I'm not talking about jail. They were going to fucking prison with rapists and murderers and all that shit. And so I had to be like, well, I want to bomb, but there's no fucking way that I want to go to prison over it. So I had to kind of shift my perspective on how I could go about that. And I was consciously trying to find spots. Like downtown LA was a great area because there was a lot of areas, a lot of walls that were already bombed, and I could just kind of sneak in a little something here and a something there. And if I'm going out every night and I'm getting something in all these different spots, I'm starting to get the sort of notoriety that I was looking for. At the same time, I feel like the cops weren't really paying attention to me because of the kinds of spots that I was choosing to hit. It's something I would like to just let at least a young, and I mean young in terms of new to the scene, regardless of your age, to think about those decisions as you're going into it. And then, if you're going to be an illegal rider, you need to make a decision on whether or not you want to have a presence on social media. Like once that cat's out of the bag, you can't really put it back in. There's a lot of people that have gotten busted because they get tagged in photos that it's on like their personal page and it's their face. And, there's people watching. So be conscious of those decisions that you're making and really think about it. Because, a couple wrong decisions can really fuck your whole life up. So if you're a little more conscious about the decisions you're making, then I think it could take you really far. There's also social aspects of things like, are you going to approach this culture with humility, or are you going to kind of approach it with like, I'm better than everybody, I can cap whoever I want? Like that kind of decision is going to come with a reputation. And once that reputation is kind of set in stone, it's kind of hard to recover from that shit. So, be mindful of this sort of I don't give a fuck attitude that you see a lot of your peers doing, especially when you're young, because when you're young, you don't really think about, you may be in this culture for 25, 30 years. And some of the shit that you do, people hold on to that stuff. So I think that's a good decision to make, like early on, to kind of decide, do you want to be the kind of writer that people respect for your humility and for being a good person while smashing the streets and while doing all of that stuff. But when they meet you in person, you're not some fucking asshole that's like thinking you're better than everybody. If you do want to be that kind of person, I'm not going to tell you not to, but it's a decision that's going to come with a consequence. So one decision could have positive effects on the rest of your career, and another decision may have negative effects on the rest of your career. There's also the decision to join a crew, and that's like a really big one, because if you're just kind of paying attention to like a crew, you see them out on the streets and you see them up everywhere. They got rollers and blockbusters and all this kind of shit, and you're sort of enticed or excited about being around these people, and you start hanging around them, and you have all this respect for all these writers in that crew, and then they ask you to join. You may be just like thinking about it on the level of like, oh man, that crew's up everywhere and they got all this respect and all this kind of stuff. But that decision that you make, you're taking on all the fucking history of that crew you're taking on, any beef that they have, any problems that they have. I mean, there's also the flip side. So, you're also gaining, now you're so-and-so from this crew. You're gaining a different level of respect based on whatever notoriety or wherever that crew sits within the culture. Obviously, you're getting some good benefits, but you should really carefully consider what kind of beefs you're taking on and what kind of people are in that crew. Because as soon as you join a crew, you're sort of linked to all of that stuff. So it's really important to make those decisions carefully, because you could be taking on a lot of shit that you're not ready for. So when you also think about when you join a crew, your behavior also reflects on that crew. So you have to think about how your decisions affect everybody else. So if you go do a bunch of dumb shit, you could end up getting somebody capped, somebody killed. Like, there's all kinds of shit, man. Like, it's critically important in this area to like just think about that stuff. So overall, I mean, when you really think about all this stuff, it's really important to kind of establish who you are, what do you stand for, what kind of values do you have, and how are your decisions going to affect you in that regard, and try to make those decisions based on that shit and not what other people think, and not acting in a certain way because you think that's how you're supposed to act, and not doing the kind of shit that you think you're supposed to be doing in order to gain whatever notoriety you think you're going after, or you think other people want you to have. So I think we all get caught up in that in every aspect of our lives, but the whole graffiti culture and the whole just idea of respect and fame and all this kind of stuff, it can really steer our brains into this direction of doing things to please other people, or to kind of fit into this kind of mold that you think you're supposed to fit into. But at the end of the day, 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, and you start to see the repercussions of some of those decisions, or maybe your life ended up somewhere where you didn't want it to go based on some shit like that you didn't even really want to do, but you were just doing it because you thought that was where you were supposed to do, or you thought that's what other people wanted you to do. I mean, that'd be a fucked up feeling at the end of the day, So I think that's all I got on the subject. So I'm going to cut in something from Cub. He was talking about a decision that he made. This was from the gut feeling episode. And here you go.
Let me fast forward to another spot that was the same thing. And here's the funny thing is, like, this was like years in the making that I thought to myself, I have to have this spot. I have to catch this spot. I'll do it when the time's right. I'll do it when all the elements just line up, when it's just the right time. And I was with some friends in the backyard doing our usual Friday night dance, with those things where all the little extracurricular fuckery. So I wasn't in a clear head. And I had this, epiphany. Tonight's the night, it's got to happen tonight. I just feel it. It's just right. Even though my gut's telling me, like, yeah, maybe it's not. Maybe you should wait till you're on point. Maybe you should just wait till you're clear-headed and all these things. Not to mention that this particular spot required rock climbing gear, which I was ill-equipped. I did not literally, but I did not know how to use this shit properly. I think I practiced it off a roof in like a backyard once, maybe. So I was nowhere near being able to use this stuff. But again, my ego and my peers and my whoever else was around, it just like hyped me up. So that was like all overpowering that gut feeling that I had. Like, no, this is probably not a good idea. Not to mention the drugs and everything else. And then we geared up. We got to the spot. It was like a 45-minute drive just to get there. The whole way there, the vibe was cool. We're all lit. Music's bumping. We're having a good night. But I'm still feeling like, I didn't know if it was like because of the scale of this spot or if I should be listening to my fucking gut here. Like, maybe this is not the right night. We get there. We set everything up. Get ready to be dropped off in position. And I had two boys with me. One was doing one thing. The other was doing another to make it all go together. And I forgot my fucking supplies. I forgot the backpack and the fucking paint back 45 minutes back. Okay, so if there wasn't already a sign before we left the pad on the way to the spot, now it was like, all right, homeboy, check it out. It's not the night. Don't do it. Go home, chill out, take sleep a little bit, get your head right. No, fuck that. Let's get it. I'll fucking drive back and fucking get the bag. And so anyway, fast forward, we ended up going back, grabbing the supplies, driving back to the spot, tying up, doing the damn thing. But again, I was so hyped up on like the feeling of trying to shut down that voice in my head that was telling me maybe just not. Maybe not tonight. Maybe this ain't your path tonight. Maybe you shouldn't be doing this. Tomorrow's another day. Maybe it's a different spot, whatever. I was so obsessed with shutting that fucking voice down. I forgot to put on gloves, which was key for the beginning of this to get to the fucking spot from point A to point B. And I got some incredible rope burn because I wasn't wearing these gloves because of a slide down from A to B, right? So then at that point, should I have fucking abandoned ship and listened to my gut at that point? Absolutely. I still didn't. I still continued to execute this particular spot. Not only, now that I'm thinking about it, not only that, but somebody got pulled over right underneath me at that same moment. So right when I fucked up my hands, and now I'm about to do the spot, someone was pulled over directly beneath us. So there was like just one sign, one God shot after another, whatever you want to call it, right? Fucking ridiculous. So yeah, again, my fucking, the pressure of pursuing a path or completing a mission that I might not necessarily have been mine in the first place was overwhelming. So it's like, it didn't matter how many signs were coming at me. I just like refused this invincibility, this feeling of like superhuman, whatever the fuck it was incredible. Anyway, so I don't want to drag this out. I'm just trying to find the value in not listening to that voice, right? Not listening to that gut feeling. So once I finished and it was time to head back up, I needed obviously strong hands to get back to point A. And they were so torn. They were so burnt by the ropes. My nerves were exposed and they were like literally twitching and opening and closing by themselves. So all it was, like you were talking about, that one hand that's holding onto the fence, that's like your only saving grace. Well, I had two at that point because I'm going up. They both just opened on their own. Like the nerves just twitched and just literally opened. And I just free fell backwards. And I remember thinking that in my head, like it felt like a 20-minute drop. It was probably 4 seconds. Right? It felt like I had all these thoughts going, how did I not listen to that voice in my head yesterday, 2 hours ago, 1 hour ago, 10 minutes ago, all those things. Fuck, my family's going to find me hanging from the spot. This is going to be my last fucking spot right here. Anyway, luckily the rope didn't catch where it should have, which would have been devastating, but it did force me to have to cut it and fall another distance at some point. And again, I could have lost my life on 3, 4, 5 different points of that entire spot. But it was all because of me not listening to that fucking gut and that intuition that told me to turn around and wait.
All right, I'm going to get out of here. So just wanted to remind you, if you caught the last episode, we're doing this Don't Be a Dick Day on Wednesdays. So head over to our Instagram @Machine Studio. We got a little, I guess there's a contest aspect to it, but it's an opportunity for you to send us in a postal label. And we're going to put it on display in our studio. We're going to have a digital gallery for everybody that sends in one is going to be a part of all that. Then we're going to pick a few and print those out on vinyl. So you'll have these vinyl 228 stickers that we'll send you some, and then we're going to distribute some of those for you. So it should be pretty cool. We're probably going to keep it running for, a couple of weeks. We'll see how it goes. But we want to get a bunch of these and have them on display in our studio in San Pedro. So it's a chance for you to get your work seen and distributed by us. Other than that, if you find any value, please share this. Review and subscribe. That stuff really helps us move up the ranking and get this in front of more people. And to everybody that has been doing that or has left us a review or has been sharing on the social media, I see all that stuff and I really appreciate it. We set out on this mission to try to put out information that helps graffiti writers improve themselves. And by doing that, we believe that the culture can improve if all the members of the culture are improving themselves. So, appreciate it. And I'm out. Thank you very much. All right. Good.
Appreciate each and every one of you guys who are supporting the cause and continue to spread the love. And stay up.